Welcome to the Marcus Oldham College AgTalk podcast. This series of podcasts focuses on the business management of Australian farms. G'day, my name is David Cornish. I am the Director for the Centre for the Study of Agribusiness at Marcus Oldham College, an independent tertiary institution that has been producing the next generation of Australian farm managers for over 50 years. The focus of the podcast is to look at the question of what makes a farmer successful. Is it just luck, or do good farmers make their own luck through hard work and utilising good business decision-making processes? I hope you enjoy the discussion. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr Kate Burke back to the Marcus Oldham AgTalk podcast to talk about her new book, Crops, People, Money and You. Having had the book for a couple of weeks, I've really enjoyed how Kate has structured the book in a way that is easy to read, but with some really powerful take-home messages in it. So welcome, Kate. How's it going?
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. No, it's all going well at this end.
Good. So, Kate, other than you like torturing yourself, why did you write the book?
Well, as a golfer,
Now, is that a golfer? What's your handicap, mate? Come on.
Pre-ordinary 24.
Good on you, 24. Better than me.
And they do say that golf wrecks a good walk, and writing a book probably is a similar process going through it. But the reason I wrote the book really was, I suppose there was a message that I could see that could give people some empowerment in their farming journey. And I thought the biggest impact I could have was by writing a book rather than just individual consulting. Obviously, individual consulting, I get to influence a small number of people in their farming journey over a 12-month period. I might speak at a few GRDC updates or other workshops and things, and influence a few other people. But by putting it all down in a book and getting it out to a much wider audience, I just felt that was the best way that I could make a contribution to farming in Australia.
Great. I think the thing that interests me, sort of got my ears pricked to start off with within the book, is you talk about the research you did as a younger you, about the differences you saw between, from a financial performance base, mainly between the top 20% and the rest. And what you were seeing was this huge gap of performance. And so what did you take out of that, and what was the sort of the learnings that you thought, well, how we can apply that to the rest of agriculture?
Yeah, well, I guess the thing that struck me for starters was that there was such a gap. So whether it's, the study was measuring an upper quartile, so 25%, or the top 20% versus the average, the fact that in most cases that upper performing group was literally earning at least double the amount, whether it's by profit or return on investment, as the average, it got me thinking. It's like, well, okay, if 25% are doing this, quite well, and then there's this gap, that means that, there's the other 75%, well, there's actually massive room for improvement, because I'm always a glass full sort of person. And it just really intrigued me. And so I kept just sort of trying to find as many studies as I could, and ABARE reports and various universities, as well as the traditional benchmarking type studies. And that trend just kept holding true. It didn't matter whether it was dairy or broadacre or, a specific portion of grain farming in a particular region. That trend is just so consistent. And I guess it just really made me think, there's such an opportunity there. So what is it that we can do better? and how can we capture that opportunity going forward.
But surely, mate, it's factors like climate and overseas prices and these things that we can't control that are affecting our performance on farm, isn't it?
Nice Dorothy Dixer there, Dave. Nice Dorothy Dixer.
I had to go there, mate.
That's the perception, and
Yep.
and it's natural to think, well, I can't do much better than I've done because the rain didn't come when I wanted it to come, or we got frosted in that year, or 93 was the year when there was a mouse plague and barley was worth $90 a tonne. All that sort of stuff is valid. I guess what's really interesting though is the studies that have looked at the potential production versus actual production across the regions in both livestock and in cropping, and also the studies that have put statistics into trying to explain the difference in farm performance. And the statistics of one particular study really stuck with me. And this was a comprehensive study, 10 years of data right across all of Western Australia. I think it was 259 farms in the data set. And within a region, it wasn't rainfall or soil type that was the difference. It wasn't grain price. It was the unique characteristics of each farm.
You make that comment early on about one of your surprises, that the diversity of farms is such that research and experience both point towards individual characteristics of each farm as the largest influencer on financial performance.
Correct. But it's natural for us not to realise that.
How much is scale important?
Good question. Again, I've looked at quite a few of the different studies where the data's been available, and it's not as important as you think, because within each group of, I guess, farm sizes, there's a massive range of performance across that farm size. And in one particular study, there was sort of a sweet spot. If you got too big, the returns tended to drop off. And that can be, it's something, I guess, that is for the larger, what I call mega farms, whether they're family-owned mega farms or corporate entities. If you're too lean and mean and you actually don't have the capacity to get things done on time over a massive area, it can impact on returns. And I think it's Bill Malcolm has a great quote that, an unprofitable large farm is just a more unprofitable farm.
Fair call.
So yeah, scale's not necessarily the answer. I think it's about doing what you're farming within your means, I guess, and having a machinery plant and fixed costs and those sort of things commensurate with the size of your farm if there isn't capacity to expand.
Okay, so let's break it down. You state that the art of excellent farming is about excellent choices when it comes to crops, people, money, and you, okay, as the title says. That's what you focus on. Can we look at these in a bit more detail? And let's start with crops. What do you think are the main things that a farmer need to get right to make excellent choices?
Yeah, okay. I guess for starters, it's actually understanding what the levers of production are and the big ticket items of production. So, in a dry land sense, for example, it's maximising the amount of water you've got available to the crop, whether it's dry land or whether it's irrigated. It's then utilising the water that's available to you. So things like time of sowing, timing's everything in farming. So whether it's timely sowing, whether it's timely operations such as spraying, disease control, all those sort of things, being on time or before time is absolutely paramount. And then understanding things like which are the big nutrition levers, and nitrogen's king. Certain soil types, phosphorus will be more important in some soil types than in others. So it's really about understanding your farm and understanding what your levers are, and being mindful that when we hear all the interesting glossy stories, that they may not necessarily apply to you in your patch.
Yeah. So again, I think this issue about timing and about management, it goes back to what you were saying before, or we're talking about the individual requirements of the farm, is that ability to get done what works for you, but make certain you hit those timelines is absolutely paramount for profitable farming. Is that something that you found with the top 20, top 25%, Kate?
Oh, absolutely. All the studies suggest that high-performing farms get their timing right, and are good at managing and good at organising and good at anticipating, good at knowing what they don't know. And being able to get advice around them. But the key thing is about being responsible for the final decision and being prepared to own the decisions on the farm. So I guess when you think about timing, by owning the decision-making process and owning the responsibility of getting things done, then you make things happen. Because, if the chemical hasn't turned up, well, you actually get on the phone and call your supplier and say, oh, how's my chemical going? If you sit and wait and don't speak up and then put the blame on the supplier, it's actually not achieving much. But by being proactive and getting on with the job, and it may be that's just the nudge that was needed, things like that. I think there's so much we can do to be proactive.
It's sort of focusing on doing the things that you can control and you can manage well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I guess people don't might think that I'm dismissive of pricing, and I'm certainly not dismissive of pricing, because obviously in a year when, if wheat's your dominant crop, and a year when wheat's $200 a tonne, it takes the shine off it compared to if wheat's $280 a tonne. But we can't control that. We can't control those big shifts in price. Those big shifts in price occur because of usually global matters or droughts.
And the things that I've seen that would back that up are just thinking about some of the benchmark studies I've seen, Kate, and we'll talk about benchmarks where they're studies, they're not the be-all and end-all, absolutely, but they show the correlation between high, very profitable farms. There's a strong relationship between productivity, but not a strong relationship with price.
Yeah, that's right, and and the reason for that is because we have more control over productivity, and a lot more control over than we think we do, because every management decision has the potential to influence the end yield. So whether that's a timing type decision, whether that's a decision to do with nitrogen application, there's just the range, I suppose, or the possibilities of yield. You think about the Western District and the possibilities of yield, basically from 2.5 tonne to 10 tonne, all in 1 year, depending on management. And yet the possibility of price in any given year is probably, might be plus or minus $50.
No, it
or,
is.
or possibly more in those higher freak years. But on, so I guess the huge variation in yield that's possible is why it's so important to get the productivity piece right.
How important is rotation? And when I'm talking about that is one of my concerns, and I don't know whether I've been reading the wrong things, Kate, but one of my concerns is about the long-term sustainability of some of our rotations, especially we're using the Western District Victoria from herbicide resistance and insect issues and things like that. Yet the most profitable rotations, which is the wheat canola, is you've got this sort of short-term trade-off versus long-term concerns. So are we seeing, is there any validation in that concern, or is it just that if we know how to manage properly, we can actually manage those long-term issues and maintain the profitable rotations?
Oh, look, I really share your concern and absolutely share your concern. And I guess I'm not sure that I've seen the evidence in the long term that on a whole farm basis that wheat canola is the most profitable rotation.
Yep.
I suspect looking at it from a gross margin perspective, it looks like it's the most profitable rotation. But if you've got a whole farm where some paddocks will have more constraints than others based on things exactly what you're talking about in the Western District, huge banks of ryegrass, issues with pests, things like slugs, issues with earwigs, all those sorts of things. My gut feel and my observations, without having looked at the data specifically for that region, is that rotations that have a livestock component in it seem to be pretty sustainable in the long term, and particularly with cattle and sheep doing so well in recent years. So I battle a bit with the crop every acre of every farm in every district.
I was going to ask you about that concept around crops intensity, because again, I think another really interesting point that I've not only heard from you, but certainly some other mentors that you mentioned in this book, talk about, that why are we cropping that last 10% where it's going to cost us, where our margins are going to be so low and our risk is higher. Why are we actually doing that?
I think a lot of it's about perception and the perception that you do need to crop every paddock to, take that margin each year. And I suspect, though, if every business actually measured their returns from every paddock every year, as in financial returns,
yep,
from a whole of business perspective, that the results might surprise them.
Yep.
Because those individual paddocks end up costing more. And all the data I've seen, I've never seen a graph that's got a straight line saying the more you crop, the more money you make.
Yep. So it's sort of been, it's about using your resources to get the biggest bang for your bucks. Is that a fair call?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously rainfall is really important in that. So, what the mix looks like in the Western District or in high rainfall regions in WA are going to be very different to what the mix looks like in the Mallee or at Geraldton. But I suppose my message is, until you actually look at your numbers well and really understand your numbers, then I'd be wary about the assumptions. And I think it's a message there for young agronomists too, to be really mindful and try and understand the impact of their decisions on the profitability of their farmers, and not to assume that cropping every paddock is necessary.
Yep. Kate, I want to move on to people, and that's again something I think that you really bring into the book world is this concept that farming is is a people's business. You know, yes, we use machinery, yes, we grow crops, but the reality is that if we want to make a successful farm, it's around people and it's around you. So you talk about the concepts of personal operating systems, your thinking landscape, your people and you. What do you mean?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Basically, humans are values driven is the bottom line. And I suppose when I talk about a personal operating system, I'm talking about values and purpose.
Yep.
And the reason I coined personal operating system was that we all know that, you know, a farm has an operating system. We're all familiar with those things these days. And there's this sort of hidden software inside. We don't know how the iOS works on our phone. We just know that we have to update it every now and then. And again, we have this hidden system inside of us that's built up through a combination of genetics and upbringing and experiences. And either consciously or subconsciously, that influences the way we think, what our biases are, and how we make decisions. And I just thought it was a really important thing to, I suppose, elevate the consciousness around that and our awareness of why we do what we do.
Mm. So are you talking about how I might make a decision about how I would evaluate information myself to make a decision on farm? Are you talking about how I communicate to my team members, or are you talking about how I would work dealing with family issues on my farming operation?
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above, because it drives everything we do. We're classics in farming at historical bias, for example.
Yep.
So, you know, if last year was a good year, we sort of have that in our head and we go into this year full of enthusiasm. Once you understand, though, that, you know, you've got a history of historical bias, then you might think, oh, okay, well, I tend to get a bit excited after a good year or a bit down in the mouth after a bad year. I need to utilise the people around me, and whether that's, you know, my business advisor or whether it's my agronomist or other members of the team, to do the rational thinking and the logical thinking about setting realistic yield targets and what the year like me might mean. You know, that's a small example.
Yep. Yeah, no. And again, I think we all, you know, it's been 3 years since Hawthorn's been in a grand final, mate. You know, I'm starting to worry.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're humans. I guess that's the thing. The fundamental thing is we're humans.
Yep.
And humans are complex beasts.
Mm.
And I guess I wanted to use terms that related to what we do on the farm to try and get these, what might have been considered airy-fairy or soft, touchy-feely, or just a bit yuck, because we might be talking about, you know, psychology. But it's all essential to what we do. So
you're talking about mental health there?
Yeah, mental health. I guess there's two aspects of it. There's just emotion in general, and then there is you know, our mental well-being, and they're subjects that a lot of people aren't comfortable with.
Yep.
Yet they're really important in terms of the influence on how we make decisions. Yep. So I guess my interest is, I read an article probably 5 years ago now by a fellow called Travis Bradbury, and he talked about uncertainty and the impact that uncertainty has on our brains, and uncertainty puts us into that fight and flight mode.
Yep.
And therefore it's really difficult to make logical and rational decisions when you're in fight and flight.
Yep.
When you think about farming, and you know, as an agronomist, or you yourself, David, as an ag professional, we think, oh, you know, it's just bloody logical. Why don't people do it like this, or why do they do that? as scientists, we've been approaching all these issues from a logic point of view, but the reality is we're not operating entirely under a logic system. We're operating in a world of uncertainty. So we're making decisions with our brain sort of flipping into the emotional side of it quite often. And therefore we might not be in the space to listen to pure logic or take on, all the evidence and everything that the researchers and the extension officers and the advisors are putting in front of us, yet we don't necessarily take it on board and follow the recipe. And that's because we're a little bit fried by this whole thing of uncertainty.
Yeah, and again, I suppose it also think about, like you and I could be sitting here and we could have an agronomist or some expert giving us exactly the same information, but because of our different, as you go back to our different upbringing, our different values, our different filters, we could make completely different decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess when you're a young advisor, you don't actually realise that.
Yep.
As you get older, you sort of become more accepting of the diversity of people, and you start to realise that it's actually harder to influence people than you think.
Yep. No, yeah, you learn that the hard way sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's right.
Mate, last one, money. Money. You talk about your revenue, your useful spending.
My favourite.
Your robust business and regret-free reward. I like the regret-free reward.
Absolutely. Yeah, the money section, I guess I wanted to tackle it slightly differently. There's lots of reports out there that talk about profit drivers.
Yep.
And again, doesn't matter whether the report's been written by David Cornish or Opinion Advisory or ORM or one of the groups from Western Australia, the messages are always pretty much the same, and that is have a reasonable fixed cost structure, have strong revenue that's generated cost effectively. And what I wanted to talk about is helping people understand their own attitudes towards spending and being aware of where their money's going. Because quite often I think I used to see on farm, like, you can be on a farm for probably half a day and you already know whether they're a spender or a non-spender.
Yep.
And often, sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not so good. So I think understanding your own traits when it comes to your own attitudes towards money is really important.
Because there's a balance between you got to spend money to make money, but you don't want to spend money just to spend money, if I can put it that way.
That's right. It's about spending money in the right spots.
Yep.
And it's about understanding the cost of machinery, for example, and understanding the concept of depreciation, and that when you spend a lot of money on equipment and plant and infrastructure, that those things won't have the same value in 5 years' time.
Yep.
So I think because that's not a cash cost, that reduction in value of your plant and equipment, it's a forgotten cost.
Yeah.
When actually assessing the true performance of the business. And and it's actually looked on as a bit of a positive because it helps you out with the tax bill.
Yep.
Whereas the reality is it's a true cost to the business and your bottom line. So I think being aware of what I call the hidden costs.
Yep.
And in terms of variable costs or spending money to make money in production, I think it's there's a real trap in underspending, and the moment we say we've got to reduce costs, concentrate on inputs, and we concentrate on inputs because they're so obvious.
Mm.
But in actual fact, we could be dribbling money away by, picking up bits and pieces every time we go to a field day or something, and topping up the workshop equipment, and yet being stingy on nitrogen. And I think I know where which one's going to give you a better return on investment.
Where your bang for your bucks are.
Yeah. And I guess that's a good point. It's about understanding which of the inputs is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. So things like summer spraying, nitrogen, disease management, all those sorts of things.
And again, I think it gets back to one of your points you make, and I'm going to use a personal anecdote here, so I'm going to call myself out here, is that you talk about behaviours or things that we've always done, and therefore it sort of becomes embedded in the way in our spending patterns. Mine was buying a coffee every morning from the coffee shop. Now, you see people walk to work and they've always got a cup of coffee. The thing is when your wife sits down with your MasterCard at the end of the year and said, "Listen, do you realise how much you spent on coffee this year?" And we're talking thousands of dollars, but it's $4.50 a day. So
it's $100.
Yeah. So my personal belief is I could justify that coffee every day because everyone does it. It makes me feel good, all that type of stuff. But the reality was that I could probably, as I say, by getting a bloody pod and spending 20 cents on a pod, it probably wasn't as good as Barista made, but I achieved that, and I'm saving myself, $1,500. Now I know it's $1,500 an example, but I know on farms that I've been involved with, there's these sort of things that people do because they've always done them, and they don't question that spend.
Yeah. A lady that I met a few years ago who's had a number of board portfolios in the agribusiness world, and she said, about in terms of cost management, she said it's about working out where the leaking pipes are and then stopping the leakages.
Yeah. And again, we're very good, and I'm guilty of this, is letting my expenditure rise to my level of income. So if I've got a bit more cash in the bank, correct, suddenly I've got, I need that, or that shiny toy or something like that, and I'll put my hand up as being guilty. But if you can just stop that, it doesn't take too long for certainly your bank balance starting to look a lot better than what it was.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess that comes down to, business basics, like actually having a budget.
Yep.
And one of the best things that I learned in corporate land was the power of monthly reconciliations. Yes. and looking at your profit and loss statement relative to the budget. So particularly on the expenditure side, obviously there's not a lot of income coming in throughout the year.
Yep.
But looking at the unders and overs and just keeping an eye on that, it's something, it's really simple to do these days because we've got to get everything up to date before the BAS anyway.
Yeah. And it's not about saying it's right or wrong. It's about asking the question why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about keeping an eye on where the money's going.
Yeah.
And preempting where the expenses, there will be years where you need to spend more money, and that's okay. But it's preempting where they're going to be and where those overs are going to happen and planning for them.
Yep. Finally, you and your personal power.
My favourite chapter.
What's that about? What power?
We've all got power. The easiest thing to change is yourself, apparently.
Well, I would have thought it would have been the hardest, mate.
Oh, it's a lot easier to change your own behaviour than anybody else's.
That's a fair call, if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't
and I guess, and I'm no Puritan and I'm human like everyone else is, and some things I've managed to manage better and some things I still battle with. I still like going to McDonald's. But I guess this chapter came about from a couple of perspectives. One, I've been doing some work on resilience over the last few years, and a lady called Catherine McEwen and her colleagues had done a lot of work on workplace resilience and what it really meant. And resilience, in their language, resilience is about being able to withstand shocks, stay well, and get the work done.
Yep.
And being able to bounce back when you need to bounce back, but also to be productive. And the way to actually maintain resilience was around all those things we've already been talking about. If you've got a personal operating system that's going well, you know your values, you're aligned, what the work you do is aligned with your values, you're being true to yourself, you've got a purpose, practical things like you're fit and healthy and functioning, that you've got support around you both at work and at home, that you're not overly stressed. All of these things help build and maintain resilience.
Yep.
And they can be taught. So I was really interested in that when I did the work with Catherine McEwen and have used these concepts in my own delivery. I was really interested in that whole concept of the easiest thing to change is your own behaviour.
Yep.
And it just got me thinking about, this whole concept of what's in our control, what's not in our control, how do we manage uncertainty. All of these things are so entwined, and with the moment we think it's someone else's fault or think the world's against us, we've given away our power.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I guess farming is full of uncertainty, and we're actually really good at dealing with it.
Mm.
So when COVID happened, Chris Saunis, who's at Wimmera Development Association these days, contacted me and said, look, you're really good at speaking about uncertainty and how to manage uncertainty and do scenario planning and all of those sort of things. I reckon it would be great if you could talk to business leaders, because with COVID, they're really battling with uncertainty and they're not used to it.
Yep.
And so I wrote a paper that I called Personal Power, just trying to put all these concepts together. And there was, over 50 Wimmera businesses and organisations were online. This is smack in the middle of, the first
lockdown.
Yeah, this is sort of March, April, when it was all really uncertain.
Yep.
What have we got here? And basically what I was teaching these guys is all the concepts that farmers do intuitively.
Mm. Mm. And I think sometimes people forget, and again, one of my biggest hates is this concept that I'm only a farmer. And I try and get them to understand, why farmers I remember when we were doing rural counselling, for instance, when we were setting that up and we had the first wool crash way back in last century, that how easy it was for farmers to get jobs because the employees really valued the self-starting resource decision-making, things that farmers take for granted that they think everyone does, but they're really good at and people really value.
Absolutely. I'm with you. I'm just a farmer. Absolutely does my head in, because they're sophisticated, complex businesses, and people, it requires practical nous, it requires intuition, business nous, people nous, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands, literally, of businesses out there that are bloody good business people and bloody good farmers. And I think we just, as a group and a community, we need to remember that and give ourselves a pat on the back when we do a good job.
Kate, I reckon that's a great point to finish on. I just want to the audience is obviously say we've basically tip of the iceberg stuff that we've talked about here, and if you're interested in any of this, I highly recommend that you get hold of Kate's book. Where would you get it, Kate?
The easiest place to get my book is to go straight to our website. And so that's thinkagri.com.au, and there's a link there to the book, and you can order it online.
Fantastic, Kate, and thank you very much for today, and thanks for putting the effort in to write a book, because they're not easy.
Thanks, Dave, and I guess my wish is that for those people that do have an opportunity to double their income in the long term, that this book helps them get there.
Terrific.
Thanks for listening to this week's Marcus AgTalk podcast. Please, any feedback on the series would be greatly appreciated. You can either leave a message on this site or email me at cornish@marcusoldham.vic.edu.au. Stay tuned to next week's podcast as we continue to explore farm management from an Australian perspective.